What would you do if you saw someone try to poison a billionaire? In the heart of Park Cafe, amidst the city's elite, a homeless kid's warning shatters the illusion of a perfect life. "Fine," she spat, her voice low but dripping with venom. "You want the truth? I'm tired of living in his shadow. Tired of his control over everything. He was never supposed to make it past this year, and But why? What dark secrets lie hidden beneath the surface of wealth and power? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to uncover the shocking truth. Like this video if you're hooked, and drop a comment with your predictions. The full story unfolds. Don't miss a single twist. In the heart of the city, where wealth shimmered like a mirage, a silent drama was about to unfold. A drama where a homeless boy's cry would challenge the illusion of a perfect life. Park Cafe was an oasis of tranquility amidst the city's relentless pulse. Manicured trees stood like sentinels, their leaves whispering secrets to the gentle breeze. A fountain, its waters sparkling under the midday sun, hummed a soothing melody. Here the city's elite gathered, their laughter and conversations mingling with the clinking of silverware. Waiters clad in crisp uniforms moved with practiced grace, balancing trays laden with culinary artistry. The air itself seemed to hum with a blend of warm bread, blooming flowers, and the subtle sweetness of success. At a table commanding the cafe's center stage sat Arthur Hamilton. His name echoed through the city's financial district, synonymous with power, ambition, and a fortune built from the ground up. At 72, Arthur carried himself with an aura of invincibility. His tailored suit, sharp and impeccable, spoke of a life where every detail was meticulously curated. Gold-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, reflecting not just the opulence around him, but also a sharp intellect that had conquered industries. Yet, as his eyes scanned the menu, a flicker of hesitation crossed his face, a momentary crack in his composed facade. Across from him sat Eleanor Vance, a woman who seemed to have stepped out of a high-fashion magazine. Her jet-black hair cascaded around a face that was impossibly flawless, every contour sculpted to perfection. Bright red lipstick accentuated the curve of her lips, a stark contrast to the cool detachment in her eyes. A diamond bracelet adorned her wrist, catching the light as she twirled it absently, her gaze more focused on the screen of her phone than the man across from her. Just beyond the cafe's patio fence, a figure lingered in the shadows. Oliver Reed was small for his 12 years, his thin frame swallowed by an oversized hoodie. His dark eyes, however, were sharp and observant, darting from table to table, cataloguing the remnants of meals and the careless placement of valuables. He was a ghost in this gilded world, familiar to the streets but invisible to its inhabitants. Arthur glanced at his watch, his voice cutting through the cafe's gentle hum. "You seem distracted again, Eleanor." Eleanor's head snapped up, a practiced smile gracing her lips. "Darling, I'm right here," she replied, her voice a silken thread. She reached across the table, her hand briefly covering his. "You know how much I cherish these lunches." But the smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and her touch felt fleeting. A performance rather than a connection. Oliver's stomach growled, a painful reminder of his constant hunger. He edged closer to the patio railing, his footsteps muffled by the soft earth. His gaze locked onto Arthur's table. A pristine white bowl held a creamy soup, accompanied by crusty bread and a glass of sparkling water. A meal that existed in his dreams. Then an anomaly occurred. As Arthur adjusted his glasses and reached for his phone, Eleanor's hand dipped into her designer handbag. Oliver's eyes narrowed. He watched as her fingers closed around a small vial, its contents catching the light for a fleeting moment. With a subtle twist, she opened it, tilting her hand almost imperceptibly over the steaming bowl. The liquid vanished into the soup, leaving no trace of its presence. Oliver's breath hitched. He froze, his mind struggling to process the scene. Was it real? Could a woman who embodied such elegance, in a setting of such refinement, be capable of such a clandestine act? A shiver ran through him, a primal instinct screaming that something was profoundly wrong. He crouched lower, seeking the anonymity of the shadows. The woman's words, though spoken softly, echoed in his mind. "After all the trouble I've gone through, you won't ruin this now." The coldness in her tone, the chilling intent. It was unmistakable. His stomach growled again, a counterpoint to the turmoil in his mind. He glanced around the patio, laughter, chatter, the clinking of glasses. No one had seen, no one had noticed. He was alone with this knowledge. His gaze returned to Arthur's hand, now reaching for the spoon. A knot tightened in Oliver's chest. It wasn't his imagination. He had seen her pour something into the soup. He knew, with a certainty that defied his age, that an irreversible course of events was about to unfold. In that moment, as Arthur's spoon hovered over the tainted soup, a question hung heavy in the air. Was it already too late to stop the impending disaster? One cry, one desperate warning. In a heartbeat, the serenity of Park Cafe shattered, replaced by a tension so thick it could choke the very air. Arthur's hand froze, the spoon inches from his lips. His eyes, sharp and commanding moments before, now widened in disbelief. He stared at Oliver, a boy he'd barely registered, as more than a shadow flitting at the edge of his awareness. Now, that shadow had invaded his meticulously ordered world, disrupting its flawless facade. Eleanor whipped around, her composure cracking like porcelain against stone. "What did you just say?" she demanded, her voice losing its silken smoothness, gaining an edge sharp enough to draw blood. Every head in the cafe turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. The clinking of glasses ceased. Even the fountain's gentle hum seemed to falter, as if nature itself held its breath. Oliver stood his ground, though his legs trembled beneath him. Adrenaline coursed through his veins, a strange mix of fear and defiance. He had to make them understand. He had to make Arthur understand. "She put something in your food. I saw her. Don't eat it." His voice, though shaky, carried across the stunned silence, each word a pebble dropped into a still pond, creating ripples of shock and confusion. A collective gasp swept through the cafe. Patrons, their faces a mixture of curiosity and alarm, twisted in their seats to witness the unfolding drama. Whispers, like furtive insects, began to crawl through the air. "Did he say poisoned? Who is that child? What's going on?" Arthur blinked, his gaze shifting between Oliver and Eleanor. "What is he talking about, Eleanor?" His tone was deceptively calm, a thin veneer over the storm of confusion brewing within him. His hand, however, trembled slightly as he carefully placed the spoon back on the table. Eleanor's practiced poise, her carefully constructed mask of elegance, began to fray. She shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the stone floor with a harsh grating sound. "You little liar," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "How dare you accuse me of something so vile? Who even let you in here?" The words, laced with disdain and fury, stung. They were meant to wound, to diminish. But Oliver didn't back down. He couldn't. Too much was at stake. His eyes remained locked on Arthur's, pleading, desperate to convey the urgency of his warning. "I saw her," he insisted, his voice gaining strength, fueled by the righteousness of his conviction. "She poured something into your soup when you weren't looking. You can smell it if you don't believe me." Arthur's face paled, the color draining from his cheeks. He turned slowly toward Eleanor, his eyes narrowing, his expression unreadable. "Eleanor," he said, his voice quiet but firm, a hint of steel underlying the question. "What exactly is going on here?" Eleanor scoffed, a brittle, dismissive sound. She waved her hand as if swatting away an annoying insect. "He's just trying to cause trouble, Arthur. Look at him. He probably just wants money or food." The words were laced with venom, each syllable a barb aimed at Oliver. But the boy didn't waver. He took a step closer to the table, his small fists clenched at his sides. "I'm not lying," he said firmly, his voice rising with a desperate urgency. "She doesn't want you to know, but I saw everything." Arthur's hand hovered over the bowl, torn between disbelief and a growing unease. Something in Oliver's tone, the raw sincerity in his eyes, gave him pause. The air around the table seemed to thicken, the once lively cafe now eerily silent, every eye a spotlight focused on the unfolding drama. Arthur leaned back slightly in his chair, studying Oliver with a scrutiny honed by years of navigating the treacherous waters of wealth and power. He was a man accustomed to deception, to people playing games for their own gain. But this felt different. The boy didn't flinch. He didn't look away. There was no hint of calculation in his gaze, only a desperate plea for belief. "Malik?" Arthur asked, testing the name, his voice steady despite the tremor of suspicion that still lingered. Oliver nodded, his throat tight. "Yes, I'm telling the truth. Please, don't eat it." The words were soft, almost a whisper, but insistent, carrying the weight of his conviction. Eleanor let out a harsh, mocking laugh. She crossed her arms, her posture radiating disdain. "This is absurd, Arthur. He's just some street kid looking for attention. Are you really going to entertain this nonsense?" But Arthur remained silent, his gaze fixed on the bowl, the question hanging heavy in the air. In a room full of doubt, who was telling the truth, and what was the price of believing the wrong person? The air in Park Cafe hung heavy, thick with unspoken questions. In the space of a heartbeat, suspicion had bloomed, casting a shadow over the once perfect tableau of wealth and elegance. Arthur's gaze remained fixed on Eleanor, his expression a mask, betraying none of the turmoil within. The years had etched lines of authority onto his face, a testament to battles won and challenges overcome. But now a new battle raged, a battle against the insidious tendrils of doubt that threatened to choke the trust he held for the woman beside him. "Explain yourself, Eleanor," he said, his voice low, each word measured. It was not a request, but a command, the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Eleanor's composure, so meticulously maintained, continued to crumble. Her eyes darted around the cafe, seeking allies, seeking escape. But she found neither. The patrons, once absorbed in their own affairs, were now a silent jury, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock, fascination, and a hint of morbid curiosity. "This is ridiculous," she began, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to control it. "He's just a street urchin. What does he know?" She gestured dismissively toward Oliver, her eyes flashing with a disdain that she no longer bothered to conceal. But Arthur didn't waver. "He saw something, Eleanor. He was adamant. And you haven't exactly been yourself lately." That last sentence hung in the air, a loaded accusation. It hinted at a history, a growing distance between them that had gone unnoticed until this moment of crisis. Eleanor's breath hitched. "What are you implying, Arthur?" Her voice rose, a sharp edge of defensiveness cutting through the tension. Oliver stepped forward, his small frame radiating an unexpected strength. "I'm not lying," he insisted, his voice clear and unwavering. "I know what I saw." He focused on Arthur, his eyes pleading. "Please, just check the soup. You have to." A waiter, frozen in place until now, finally found his voice. "Sir, should I call the authorities?" The question rippled through the cafe, a stark reminder of the gravity of the situation. It forced Arthur to make a choice, to decide whether to dismiss the boy's claims as the ramblings of a desperate child, or to confront the terrifying possibility that his world was not what it seemed. Arthur's hand, still hovering near the bowl, clenched into a fist. He looked at the soup, its creamy surface now a mirror reflecting his own wavering trust. Then he looked at Eleanor, his gaze searching, probing. "Tell me the truth, Eleanor," he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a lifetime of expectations. Eleanor's carefully constructed facade finally shattered. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes filled with a flicker of panic. I don't know what you want me to say." "The boy," Arthur pressed, his voice relentless. "Did you put something in my soup?" Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. It was a silence punctuated only by the frantic beating of Eleanor's heart and the distant wail of sirens growing louder, closer. In that agonizing pause, as the truth hung suspended between them, the question lingered. Could Arthur truly confront the darkness that might lie hidden beneath the surface of his perfect life, or would he choose to remain blind? The sirens wailed, growing louder, closer, their insistent cry a soundtrack to the unraveling of a carefully constructed illusion. The silence stretched, taut and fragile, threatening to snap at any moment. Arthur's gaze remained locked on Eleanor, his face an unreadable mask. But beneath the surface, a storm raged. Years of shared breakfasts, whispered secrets, and intertwined lives were being weighed against the desperate words of a boy he barely knew. "The truth, Eleanor," he repeated, his voice low and dangerous. "There's no escaping it now." Eleanor's facade crumbled, her shoulders slumped, her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the lines of stress that now etched her face. She looked around the cafe, her eyes darting from face to face, searching for an escape, a lifeline. But there was none. She was trapped, caught in the spotlight of her own making. The first police officers arrived, their uniforms a stark contrast to the cafe's pastel elegance. They moved with quiet authority, their presence instantly changing the atmosphere. All eyes turned to them, then back to the central table, where the drama had reached its peak. One of the officers, his face impassive, addressed Arthur. "Sir, we received a call regarding a possible incident." Arthur nodded, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hand as he gestured toward the untouched bowl of soup. "This boy, he claims my wife poisoned it." The officers exchanged glances, their expressions carefully neutral. One of them approached the table, his eyes assessing the scene. He leaned down, cautiously sniffing the soup. A flicker of something, disgust, recognition, crossed his face. He straightened up, turning to Eleanor. "Mom, do you have anything to say about this?" Eleanor's face flushed crimson. "This is absurd. It's ridiculous. He's just a street kid trying to make trouble." "Arthur, you can't seriously believe this nonsense." But the officer wasn't swayed. "We'll need to test the contents, Ma'am," he said, reaching for the bowl. "No." Eleanor's voice cracked, rising in pitch. Her sudden outburst drew even more attention, and her panic only served to fuel the growing suspicion. The officer paused, his eyes narrowing. "Ma'am, is there something you'd like to tell us before we proceed?" Eleanor hesitated, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looked at Arthur, a flicker of something, pleading, defiance, in her eyes. Then she looked at the officers, her hands trembling as she clutched her handbag. Finally, her resolve crumbled. "Fine," she spat, her voice low but dripping with venom. "You want the truth? I'm tired of living in his shadow. Tired of his control over everything. He was never supposed to make it past this year, and She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening in horror as she realized the implications of her words. The cafe erupted. Gasps, whispers, the scraping of chairs as patrons surged forward, phones held aloft, capturing the scene for posterity. Arthur recoiled as if struck. The color drained from his face, leaving it ashen. The weight of her confession hit him like a physical blow, crushing the very foundation of his world. The officer stepped forward, his expression grim. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder. Please put your hands where I can see them." Eleanor's composure shattered completely. She screamed, lashing out, trying to wriggle free as they secured her hands behind her back. "You don't understand. I deserved it. He had everything, everything." Her voice echoed through the stunned cafe, a raw, desperate cry of a woman consumed by bitterness. Arthur sank back into his chair, his hand trembling as he pushed the incriminating bowl away. For a long moment he said nothing, his face a mask of disbelief and profound betrayal. Then his eyes, filled with a dazed confusion, found Oliver, who stood frozen, caught between fear and a strange sense of vindication. As Eleanor was led away, her cries fading into the distance, the cafe remained suspended in a stunned silence, the question echoing in the air. What happens when the gilded cage is finally broken and the darkness within is exposed? The cafe, once a haven of affluence, now bore the scars of a violent emotional storm. The lingering scent of expensive perfume mingled with the acrid tang of betrayal. Arthur sat in stunned silence, the world around him tilting on its axis. The woman he had shared his life with, the woman he had believed in, was being led away in handcuffs, her words echoing in his ears. He was never supposed to make it past this year. He looked down at his hands, his strong, capable hands, now trembling slightly. How could he have been so blind? How could he have missed the darkness lurking beneath the surface of that polished smile? The murmurs in the cafe slowly began to rise again, like the tide returning after a storm. Patrons exchanged glances, their faces a mixture of pity, curiosity, and a hint of fear. The illusion of safety and order had been shattered, replaced by the unsettling reminder that darkness could lurk anywhere, even in the most beautiful of settings. A waiter approached Arthur hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, is there anything I can get you?" Arthur shook his head, his gaze distant. He wasn't in the cafe anymore. He was lost in a labyrinth of confusion and pain, replaying every moment, every conversation, searching for clues he had missed. Then his eyes fell on Oliver. The boy stood a few feet away, his small frame rigid, his expression unreadable. He looked like a stray caught in the aftermath of a battle, unsure of his place in this world of wealth and chaos. Arthur gestured weakly. "Malik," he said, his voice rough, "come here." Oliver hesitated, glancing around at the lingering stares. But there was something in Arthur's voice, a vulnerability that transcended the usual arrogance of the powerful that compelled him to obey. He approached the table slowly, his steps cautious. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Sit down, Malik," Arthur said, his voice softer now, gentler. He gestured to the chair Eleanor had occupied just moments before. Oliver hesitated again, then slowly, tentatively, sank into the chair. It was plush and soft, a world away from the hard pavement he was used to. He felt out of place, like he didn't belong. Arthur looked at the boy, really looked at him for the first time, not just as an inconvenience, a disruption, but as a person. He saw the weariness in his eyes, the thinness of his frame, the quiet strength that radiated from him despite his circumstances. "You saved my life," Arthur said, his voice low, filled with a gratitude that went beyond mere words. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." Oliver fidgeted, his hands gripping the edge of the table. I couldn't let it happen," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "I couldn't just watch and do nothing." Arthur nodded, his gaze distant as he replayed the scene in his mind. "Most people would have," he said after a long pause. "They would have looked the other way, pretended they didn't see. But you didn't. That took courage, Malik, real courage." Oliver shrugged, embarrassed by the praise. I don't like seeing people get hurt. That's all." Arthur leaned back, studying the boy with a newfound intensity. He saw not just a scrappy kid from the streets, but someone with a depth of character that shamed the shallowness of his own recent choices. "How long have you been out there?" he asked, the question tinged with a curiosity that surprised even himself. Oliver looked away, a flicker of pain in his eyes. "A while," he said, his voice guarded. Arthur frowned, sensing the boy's reluctance, but he didn't press. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, its sleek black surface reflecting the light. "Wait here," he said, standing up. "I need to make a call." As Arthur stepped away, leaving Oliver alone in the opulent cafe, a fragile seed of hope began to sprout amidst the wreckage of the day, a question hanging in the air. Could this be the beginning of a new chapter? Or would the shadows of his past forever haunt his footsteps? The world outside Park Cafe continued its relentless rhythm, oblivious to the seismic shift that had occurred within its walls. But for Arthur and Oliver, nothing would ever be quite the same. Arthur finished his call, his expression thoughtful as he returned to the table. Oliver watched him, a mixture of apprehension and curiosity swirling within him. He'd never been the object of such attention, especially not from someone like Arthur Hamilton. "Help is on the way," Arthur said simply, his voice devoid of his earlier commanding tone. Oliver's brow furrowed. "Help? What kind of help?" Arthur offered a small, almost hesitant smile. "I called someone I trust, someone who can make sure you have a place to stay tonight, somewhere safe, somewhere warm." Oliver's eyes widened, surprise flickering across his face. He was used to the cold indifference of the streets, the casual dismissal, the averted gazes. This unexpected offer of kindness threw him off balance. "You don't have to do that," he said quickly, his voice defensive. "I didn't do it for money or anything." Arthur's smile deepened, a genuine warmth reaching his eyes this time. "I know that, Oliver. That's why I want to help you. You did something most people wouldn't have. And trust me, if the world had more people like you, it would be a much better place." For the first time in a long, long time, Oliver felt a warmth spread through him, a sensation he couldn't quite name. It wasn't just the warmth of a promise of shelter, it was something deeper, something that touched the core of his being. He looked down, unsure of how to respond. Words seemed inadequate, clumsy. The cafe patrons began to disperse, the initial shock giving way to a restless energy. They cast curious glances at Arthur and Oliver, their whispers following them, like a faint echo. Arthur stood up. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get out of here." He led Oliver out of the cafe, the contrast between their figures stark. Arthur, tall and impeccably dressed, a titan of industry. Oliver, small and clad in worn clothes, a survivor of the streets. Yet in that moment they were connected by an invisible thread of gratitude and a shared experience that transcended their vastly different backgrounds. They walked in silence for a while, Arthur leading Oliver to a sleek black car parked nearby. As Arthur opened the door, he turned to Oliver, his eyes serious. "I want to understand," he said. "Tell me about yourself, Oliver. Tell me about your life." And so Oliver began to talk, hesitantly at first, then with a growing sense of release. He spoke of the hunger, the cold, the constant fear. He spoke of the small acts of kindness he encountered and the overwhelming indifference. He spoke of his dreams, his hopes, his longing for something more. Arthur listened, truly listened, his usual impatience replaced by a profound sense of empathy. He began to see the world through Oliver's eyes, a world he had been blind to for so long. The drive took them away from the city's heart to a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and modest houses. Arthur stopped in front of one of the houses, its porch light casting a warm glow. "This is where you'll be staying for now," he said. "It's not much, but it's safe. And there's a warm bed waiting for you." Oliver stared at the house, his eyes wide with disbelief. A house, a real house, with walls and a roof and a bed. It was a concept so foreign to him, it felt like a dream. As Oliver stepped out of the car, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation, the question lingered. Could this be the beginning of a new chapter, or would the shadows of his past forever haunt his footsteps? Oliver settled into his new reality, a world with a roof over his head and food in his belly. But for Arthur, the echoes of betrayal refused to fade, stirring up shadows he thought he had long buried. The days that followed Eleanor's arrest were a strange mix of order and chaos for Arthur. The cafe incident became a citywide spectacle, dissected and sensationalized by the media. Arthur, a man who valued his privacy, found himself thrust into the unwanted spotlight. He retreated into his work, burying himself in the familiar rhythm of deals and negotiations. But even the towering skyscrapers and the hum of the trading floor couldn't drown out the nagging questions that haunted him. How could he have been so wrong about Eleanor? What did he truly know about the woman he had shared his life with? These questions chipped away at his confidence, revealing cracks in the foundation of his self-assurance. He began to see his life as a carefully constructed facade, built on wealth and power, but lacking in genuine connection. Meanwhile, Oliver cautiously embraced his newfound stability. The house Arthur provided was modest but clean, a far cry from the harsh realities of the streets. He ate regular meals, slept in a warm bed, and even started attending a local school. He was intelligent and eager to learn, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. But he also carried the scars of his past, a wariness in his eyes, a tendency to flinch at sudden movements, a deep-seated fear of abandonment. Arthur, in his own way, was also grappling with the weight of the past. The investigation into Eleanor's actions had unearthed details about their relationship that Arthur had conveniently ignored. Her resentment, her isolation, her growing desperation, they were all there, hidden in plain sight, masked by her beauty and charm. One evening, Arthur received a call. It was from a lawyer representing a woman named Clara, a name that sent a jolt of recognition through him. Clara was a ghost from Arthur's past, someone he had wronged years ago in his ruthless climb to the top. The lawyer's voice was polite but firm. Clara was dying, and she had one final request. She wanted to meet with Arthur. Arthur hesitated. He had spent years running from the consequences of his actions, burying his guilt beneath layers of success. But now, with the recent upheaval in his life, the past was demanding to be confronted. He agreed to the meeting. The hospital room was sterile and quiet, a stark contrast to Arthur's opulent world. Clara lay in the bed, her face pale and gaunt, but her eyes still held a spark of the woman Arthur remembered. Their conversation was strained at first, filled with unspoken accusations and lingering pain. Clara spoke of the hurt Arthur had caused her, the dreams he had shattered, the life he had irrevocably changed. Arthur listened, his heart heavy with remorse. He couldn't undo the past, but for the first time he truly acknowledged the damage he had inflicted. As Clara's strength waned, she offered Arthur a fragile forgiveness. "Don't let my pain define you, Arthur," she whispered, her voice weak. "Use your second chance wisely." Clara's words struck a chord deep within Arthur. He realized that Oliver's unexpected intervention wasn't just about saving his life. It was about giving him an opportunity for redemption. He left the hospital a changed man, the weight of his past still present, but now tempered with a newfound determination to make amends. As Arthur stepped back into the city's vibrant chaos, he carried Clara's words like a compass, guiding him toward an uncertain future. But the question remained, could he truly escape the shadows of yesterday, or were they destined to forever define him? The city, with its ceaseless energy, continued to spin. But within its intricate web, two lives had been irrevocably altered, bound together by an unlikely act of courage and a shared journey toward healing. Arthur's transformation was gradual but profound. He started divesting himself of some of his more ruthless business practices, much to the shock of his colleagues. He began funding community projects, investing in people rather than just profit margins. The man who was once known for his cold efficiency was now showing a surprising capacity for compassion. His relationship with Oliver deepened. Arthur wasn't trying to save Oliver, he was learning from him. He saw in Oliver a resilience, a purity of heart that he realized he had lost somewhere along the way. They spent hours together, exploring the city, sharing stories, building a genuine connection that transcended their vastly different backgrounds. Oliver, in turn, blossomed under Arthur's guidance and support. He excelled in school, his intelligence and thirst for knowledge finally given an outlet. He made friends, discovered new passions, and began to dream of a future he had never thought possible. However, the shadow of Eleanor's actions still lingered. The trial was a media circus, further tarnishing Arthur's reputation. He received hate mail, faced protests, and was ostracized by some members of his social circle. Yet through it all, Arthur remained steadfast. He refused to be defined by the actions of another. He focused on building a better future, a future where kindness and compassion prevailed over greed and ambition. One day, Arthur visited Eleanor in prison. She was a changed woman, humbled by her circumstances, her anger replaced by a quiet remorse. She didn't ask for forgiveness, but she offered a fragile apology, a recognition of the pain she had caused. Arthur listened, his heart filled with a complex mixture of sadness and understanding. He realized that even in the darkest of circumstances, change was possible. The story doesn't end with a neat, tied-up bow. Arthur and Oliver's journey continues, their bond a testament to the transformative power of human connection. Arthur's past still casts a long shadow, but he faces the future with a newfound sense of purpose. Oliver's path is uncertain, but it is filled with hope and possibility. The final scene shows Arthur and Oliver standing together, overlooking the city skyline. The sun is rising, casting a golden glow over the buildings, symbolizing the dawn of a new day. "What do you want to do with your life, Oliver?" Arthur asks, his voice filled with genuine curiosity. Oliver smiles, his eyes shining with a newfound confidence. "I want to help people, Arthur, like you helped me." Arthur places a hand on Oliver's shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the profound impact this young boy has had on his life. The camera pans out, capturing the vastness of the city and the small figures of Arthur and Oliver standing together, a beacon of hope in a world that often feels chaotic and unkind. The question lingers. In a world driven by ambition and greed, can genuine human connection truly change the course of destiny? What this story reminds us is that change can come from the most unexpected places. It's not about wealth or status, but about the courage to do what's right and the willingness to extend a hand to those who need it. Arthur's journey shows us that even those who seem lost in their own ambitions can find a path to redemption. And Oliver's bravery reminds us that kindness, no matter how small, can have a ripple effect, transforming lives in ways we never imagined. If you were moved by Arthur and Oliver's story, please hit that subscribe button to join our community and explore more tales of transformation and hope. Give this video a like if it resonated with you, and share it with someone who needs a reminder of the power of compassion. What did you take away from this story? Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts.